Imagine you drop into an extraction shooter, you loot for 5 minutes, you find something incredible, and then, out of nowhere, you hear footsteps. It's another player. And in that single moment, your brain is doing something extraordinary. It's calculating risk, reading audio cues, and weighing the value of what's in your bag against the cost of a fight that you might not win. That exact moment is what the entire extraction shooter genre is built on. Now here's the thing, two of the biggest games in this space right now, Arc Raiders and Marathon, both promise you that feeling, both deliver it, but they are doing something fundamentally different to get you there. And when you look closely at the design decisions underneath the surface, one of these games understands PvPvE balance on a deeper level than the other, and it's not the one with 500,000 concurrent players. I'm not here to tell you Arc Raiders is a bad game, it's not. It might be one of the most accessible, polished, and commercially successful extraction shooters ever made, but today we're going to make the case with evidence, with data, and with design theory that Marathon understands PvPvE balance better than Arc Raiders. And by the end of this video, I'm going to argue that Marathon, despite being the smaller game, might actually be the more sophisticated PvPvE design. Stay with me on this one because the answer is not what you expect. But before we start breaking down the mechanics, there's something important you should know about how these games are designed, because they come from completely different philosophical starting points, and that shapes everything. And if you're new here, I'm Darth Trooper Gaming. This channel breaks down the design decisions behind the games shaping the industry, and now let's get into it. Arc Raiders CEO Patrick Sunderland has been very clear about the philosophy behind the game. PvP was never meant to be the main event. In his words, the game isn't about shooting other players. You can do that if you want to, but the ethos of the game has never been to go in and shoot players. It's a part of what we use to craft tension. Arc Raiders was originally designed as a pure PvE game. Players were added to the mix specifically to create tension, not to make it a deathmatch. The Arc Raiders machines are the real enemy. Other players are just an unpredictable variable in that equation. Marathon, on the other hand, was built from the ground up with PvP as the primary experience. Bungie's creative director, Joe Ziegler, has described the game's core design principle as uncertainty. The thrill, in his words, comes from not knowing what's coming next. Every encounter matters. Marathon is a game that wants you to feel the weight of every decision. Do I fight? Do I loot? Do I run? And it achieves that by refusing to separate aggressive players from passive ones, by making AI a genuine threat rather than a backdrop, and by designing gunplay that's so satisfying that PvP encounters feel like the reward for surviving everything else. These are two legitimate, coherent visions, but one of these visions accidentally removes the very tension extraction shooters rely on, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now we get to the part where the design gap between these two games starts to show, and it all comes down to one question. What do you do with aggressive players? Arc Raiders uses what Embark calls aggression-based matchmaking. The system tracks player behavior, specifically who initiates PvP combat, and over time tends to group more aggressive players together and more passive players together. Design lead Virgil Watkins has clarified that it's a weighted system and not a binary one, and it doesn't operate on skill or gear, but the intent is still clear. Arc Raiders is actively trying to manage the PvP tension in its lobbies. It's trying to give PvE-focused players a more controlled experience. And from a commercial standpoint, that's a brilliant decision. It's one of the reasons Arc Raiders has 14 million copies sold and a peak concurrent player count of nearly 500,000 on Steam alone. By softening the PvP edge, Embark made the game accessible to a much wider audience. But here's the design trade-off that nobody really talks about. When you reduce the unpredictability of player encounters, you also reduce the stakes. If a PvE-focused player knows, even subconsciously, that they're less likely to run into a highly aggressive squad, the tension of every run decreases. The moment you hear footsteps becomes slightly less terrifying. The decision to fight or flee becomes slightly less meaningful. Marathon makes the opposite choice. Bungie explicitly decided not to implement aggression-based matchmaking. Ziegler's reasoning was direct. Separating aggressive and passive players would flatten the gameplay. In Marathon, every lobby is a true mixed environment. The passive player and the hunter are in the same match, and neither knows what the other is going to do. It's what makes every extraction feel earned and every death feel instructive. The result is a game that is, by design, harder to play casually, but it's also a game where the PvPvE tension is never diluted, and that, fundamentally, is why Marathon's balance is more pure, even if Arc Raiders' balance is more popular. Now we get to the part where the difference between these games becomes impossible to ignore: the AI. Because this isn't about whether the enemies look cool or shoot accurately, it's about whether the AI is a part of the game or just a decoration. In Arc Raiders, the Arc machines are genuinely impressive. They have varied types like the Leapers, Wafts, Snitches, Bombardiers, and Rocketeers. And they use machine learning assisted animation that makes their movement feel organic and threatening. Early on, they're intimidating, but as journalist Justin Joy noted in his comic book piece comparing the two games, once players understand the behavior patterns, the Arc machines become relatively easy to avoid or eliminate. Critically, few AI enemies in Arc Raiders can even enter buildings. The indoor spaces, where most looting happens, are largely safe from AI intrusion. The machines are a threat in the open world, but they rarely follow you into spaces where you're most vulnerable. Marathon's UESC forces operate on a completely different principle. Bungie has explicitly designed these enemies to be an active part of the environment, not just simply obstacles. They patrol areas, they react aggressively when provoked, they enter buildings, they spawn reinforcements mid-objective, and most importantly, they can disrupt PvP encounters in ways that fundamentally change the outcome of a match. Think about what that means in practice. In Arc Raiders, if two squads are fighting each other, the AI is largely irrelevant to that fight. It's happening in the background. In Marathon, a firefight between two squads can suddenly draw the attention of nearby USC forces, turning a two-team duel into a chaotic three-way survival situation. Positioning, noise discipline, and awareness of the AI's patrol routes become just as important as your aim. The AI isn't just content to fill, it's a mechanic that actively shapes PvP encounters. This is the deeper meaning of PvPvE balance. It's not about having both players and AI in the same map, it's about whether the AI is integrated into the PvP experience in a meaningful way. In Marathon, it is. In Arc Raiders, it largely isn't. And that's a deliberate choice that serves Arc Raiders more accessible design goals, but it does mean the PvPvE ecosystem is less tightly woven. Up to this point, we've been talking about design theory, but the real question is whether any of this actually matters in the real world, and that's where the numbers come in. And here's the part where the conversation gets a little uncomfortable, because what the data shows is something that both communities might not want to hear. This is a snapshot of the 5 most played PvPvE extraction shooters on Steam, with data pulled on March 9th via SteamDB. Now, the surface level read of this table is quite obvious. Arc Raiders is the king of the current extraction shooter wave, and Marathon is a distant second. And that's true. Arc Raiders has sold over 14 million copies as of February 2026, peaked at nearly 500,000 concurrent players on Steam, and was the top-selling game across Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation for 3 consecutive months. That is a historic achievement for the genre, but here's what the table doesn't show you: context. Marathon launched on March 5th, 2026 at a $40 premium price point. Not free to play, not discounted, not bundled. It launched with a deliberately hardcore PvPvE design that, as we've discussed, does not soften the experience for casual players. And it still managed over 88,000 peak concurrent Steam players on launch day, earned a very positive review score of 86.98% from over 22,000 reviewers, and is currently retaining over 60,000 players on Steam alone just 4 days after launch. Compare that to Hunt Showdown 1896, the genre's beloved cult classic, a game with an 8-year history and one of the most loyal communities in gaming. Hunt peaked at over just 60,000 concurrent players in its 2024 relaunch. Marathon, a brand new IP reboot, nearly matched that on day 1 and is already surpassing it in daily retention. The argument isn't that Marathon is a bigger commercial success than Arc Raiders. It isn't, and it probably won't be. The argument is that for a game with a design philosophy that deliberately narrows its casual audience, that refuses aggression-based matchmaking, that makes AI enemies a genuine threat, that demands real decision-making in every run, an 88,000 player peak and near 90% positive reviews is not a disappointment, it's a validation. It means the hardcore PvPvE audience that Marathon was built for showed up, and they liked what they found. The numbers don't say Marathon is more popular, popular, they say Marathon found its people. Now, I promised you that this wouldn't be a one-sided video, and I meant it. So let's talk about where Marathon still has real work to do, because it does. The most significant issue is onboarding. Marathon throws you into a dense, interconnected system of mod slots, upgrade trees, faction contracts, and mission objectives with almost no explanation. For a new player with no prior context, the first few hours of Marathon can feel genuinely overwhelming. The mission objectives in particular are poorly communicated in-world, sometimes represented by nothing more than a single floating icon with no contextual explanation. The hero class system, the runner shells, is another area that hasn't fully landed yet. The concept is sound. Different runners with different abilities create team compositions and strategic variety, but the execution feels generic compared to what Bungie has achieved in its own back catalog. The archetypes feel like mostly generic shapes of characters we've already seen a bunch already, and the comparison to Destiny's deeply individualized class identities is hard to ignore. The abilities work, but they don't really feel iconic. Movement also has some rough edges. Fall damage from moderate heights feels punishing in a way that can break the flow of an otherwise smooth run. The heat gauge, effectively a stamina meter that limits sprinting, is an interesting design choice that adds tactical depth, but it can also feel like an arbitrary obstacle during tense moments. And the geometry can cause your character to get caught on environmental edges at the worst possible times. Finally, there's the monetization conversation. Marathon launched at $40 with a seasonal battle pass and a premium currency store for cosmetics. The pricing of individual cosmetics has drawn significant community criticism, and the 3-month seasonal wipes, while designed to keep the game dangerous and fresh, have been a controversial sticking point for players who feel their progression is being reset too aggressively. These are real problems. They're the kind of friction that can cause players to bounce off a game before they reach the depth of what makes it special. But here's the thing, and this is the part that I want you to hold on to. Underneath all of that friction, the core of Marathon is extraordinary. The gunplay is, by nearly universal consensus among reviewers and the community alike, some of the best in the genre. Bungie's legendary 4 seconds of perfect gameplay repeated philosophy is on full display here. The snap of a rifle report, the rhythmic kick of a pulse rifle's recoil, the way enemy shields crackle and splinter when you land shots, it all adds up to a shooting experience that feels genuinely alive in a way that very few games achieve. When Marathon gets out of its own way and lets you play, it is absolutely electric. And that foundation, that mechanical bedrock, is what gives every other design decision in this game meaning. So let's bring this home. What does it actually mean to say that Marathon understands PvPvE balance better than Arc Raiders? It doesn't mean Marathon is more fun for more people. Arc Raiders is. It doesn't mean Marathon is a bigger commercial success. Arc Raiders is that too, and by a wide margin. What it means is this. Marathon has built a game where the PvP and PvE elements are not two separate systems running in parallel. They are one integrated, interdependent ecosystem. In Arc Raiders, the design philosophy separates these elements. The PvE is the main course, the PvP is the spice. The aggression matchmaking system manages the interactions between them. The AI stays mostly outside while players loot inside. These are all deliberate, commercially smart choices, and they've produced one of the most successful games of 2025 and probably 2026 as well. But they also mean that the PvPvE tension is, to some degree, managed rather than felt. In Marathon, the design philosophy refuses that separation. The AI enters your buildings. The matchmaking doesn't protect you from hunters. Every run is a genuine unknown. The PvP and PvE are not two flavors that you can choose from. They are the same experience, happening simultaneously, and you have to navigate both at once. That is a harder game to make, a harder game to sell, and a harder game to play. But it is a more honest expression of what PvPvE balance can be at its best. Arc Raiders built the extraction shooter for everyone. Marathon built the extraction shooter for the people who want to feel every second of it. Both matter, both deserve to exist, but if you're asking which one understands the balance, which one has thought most deeply about what it means to put players and AI in the same space and make both feel meaningful, the answer right now is Marathon. So the next time you're creeping through a building in an extraction shooter, listening for footsteps, deciding whether to fight or run, remember what makes that moment work. It's not just the players, it's the world pushing back. That's what Marathon is trying to build. And for the people it was built for, it's already working. If you're playing Arc Raiders right now, keep playing it. It's a phenomenal game and one of the best multiplayer experiences of the year. If you haven't tried Marathon yet, I genuinely think you owe it to yourself to give it a real shot. Get past the onboarding friction, find a squad, and let the game show you what it's capable of. Because when it clicks, and it will click, there's nothing else quite like it. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these games do you think has the better PvPvE balance? Are you Team Arc Raiders, Team Marathon, or are you still out there in the Tarkov wilderness where it all began? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you know. And if you want more deep dives like this one, hit subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss another drop. We've got a lot more content coming on both of these games as they evolve. I'm Darth Trooper Gaming, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay tactical, my friends.